Hi guys, Buildzoid here, and so this is installment number 3 of the Buildzoid rambles about various motherboards for X570 series, and there we go, that's a bit better. Today we're going to be taking a look at MSI, I've not been paying too much attention to what they're doing with their motherboards, but they do have some really, they have some very impressive boards. So yeah, we'll start right off with the first board in the line, so the Godlike here, and that is a very expensive board. It's $700. And unfortunately, I kind of feel like MSI, I prefer the Creation, just even in terms of feature set and just how the the thing is, the Godlike has a whole bunch of like extreme overclocking features, but I'd rather have a Creation. For like normal day-to-day usage. And for extreme overclocking, I'd probably pick up like a Crosshair 8 Hero or something. The Godlike just, yeah, it's too much. It's just way too much. But anyway, so we'll start with the Godlike. And 14 plus 4 plus 1. It has, as far as I know, it has two-phase memory power, so I wonder what that plus 1 is. I think it should be 14 plus 4 plus 2. But ultimately, they're not claiming that they have more phases than they really have. And actually, oh yeah, so 4600 versus 4800. I'm not sure if that's this one might be T topology, but at the same time, it could still very much be a daisy chain. Cause, and the difference in the frequency here is, as far as I think this one's on an 8-layer PCB and that one's on a 6. But yeah, so the thing is, the Godlike basically tries to do, well, I wish I could say it tries to do everything, but it just tries to be like this ridiculous gaming overclocking board. Kind of like what Asus used to do with their extreme boards, except more expensive. Well, no, not really more expensive. Equally ridiculous in terms of price tag, except I don't like the execution so much. And I don't like the execution so much because that right there, the onboard LAN on this motherboard is freaking killer. And the thing is, they do give you like there's like a crazy amount of accessories in that. Yeah, you get a 10 gig accessory card, right, in the package of the motherboard, which is like, okay, cool. So the motherboard does have 10 gig, which makes sense because it's $700, so it's more expensive than the Prestige, than the Creation down here. So, and the Creation has 10 gig on board, so it'd be really stupid if your more expensive board didn't have the same 10 gig LAN. But here, the 10 gig LAN eats up one of your PCIe slots. So that's bad. Like, as far as I'm concerned, that's actually a pretty major issue, right? They also have the M.2 expander Z, and it's just like, okay, so you have all of these PCIe expansion, the expander, the M.2 expander thing is cool. I think that's a cool accessory to have, but having the 10 gig LAN on an expansion card instead of integrated into the board when you have freaking, like, they have a gigabit killer, 2.5 gig killer. It's like, no, it should be 1 gig Intel on board, 10 gig of Quantia, because that's what I assume is on that expansion card. And then if you want a silly expansion card, put the 2.5 gig killer internet on that. Or some other, like, personally, it's just like, I want my Intel LAN. Okay, first, that's the basic first requirement I have, is just, I want my Intel LAN. They also, why do they have dual Realtek codecs? And, yeah, I mean, I don't pay that much attention to audio. Like, this is one of those things that I don't get about ultra high-end boards, is just like, people who actually care about sound will just buy a sound card, external. And people who don't care about, well, I guess you can make them overpay for an audio solution on the motherboard. That works. So, yeah, like, this board just kind of tries to cram a ton of stuff. And yet, the I.O. section looks like a mid-range or even a low-end motherboard, as far as I'm concerned. Like, yes, you have the Wi-Fi, but... And you do, like, if it weren't for the Wi-Fi and the 2.5 gig LAN, this would straight up look like a low-end audio, like, rear I.O. section. Like, also, if you remove that port, and if this was missing, it's not that far from a low-end board. So, yeah, I'm really not a fan. There's not enough USB ports on the back. Like, at this point, it's concerning, because it's like, okay, so you have mouse, keyboard, and I have a sound card, and then it's like webcam, and then you have one extra USB port left, and it's just like, yeah, no, that's no good. Um, do they, wait, I'm trying to figure out. So they have one right angle USB 3.0, another one. And do they have one like on the bottom edge? Nope. No, they don't. So yeah, this like for the price, I think this board, like I don't know, this board just seems like a mishmash of too many things, and that's why I don't like it very much, because it's just like, yes, there's a lot of stuff that you like. If you just made a list of all the things on the Godlike and then went through that list, it would probably have the longest list of things of any motherboard on X570. But none of those things is really like, I don't feel like any of them are really that well thought through. Like we have some extreme overclocking support on this board. You have, the memory overclocking is insane. Like MSI recently posted a memory frequency with Ryzen 3rd gen attempt on this motherboard, and it was like 5.7 gigahertz or something insane like that. So the board is very good at memory overclocking, but it's just like nobody's going to buy a $700 motherboard just because it's good at memory overclocking, especially since you can buy other motherboards that are much cheaper that will clock memory maybe 200 megahertz worse. Which, like, it might sound like a big deal, but you save freaking, what, 200, you get, like, especially because with the Creation, I feel like you have a more thought out feature set, right, compared to the Godlike, where the Godlike is just this weird mishmash of stuff. And it's like, I don't even want a lot of this stuff, personally. It's just like, the killer LAN should just not be there. Like, one of them should be Intel. The 10 gig should be on the board so it doesn't waste PCIe slots. At the same time, considering that it has 4 PCIe slots, right, you might be like, oh, I can totally run like 4-way crossfire on this. Yes, you can. And there's also no extra 6-pin power connector for the PCIe slot, so you're going to be running the risk of melting your 24-pin. So that's also just like, it feels like it doesn't feel very thought out. It feels like it was just a jumbled mess of high-end stuff. And like the VRM is ridiculously expensive and really overbuilt and awesome. And yet it's just like there's other boards that I feel like do that too and do that slightly better. And the feature set, it's just, I don't like the board overall very much. Like, that's basically my conclusion about it. It's a weird mishmash of just too many things, and it just doesn't make that much sense. So for $700, I just don't like the Godlike. It is very impressive in terms of its overclocking capabilities, but paying $700, like, I feel like if they did like a properly overclocking focused board or something, and it was like $400 cheaper or maybe $300 cheaper, because there's a lot of things on this motherboard. Like, you could cut down that VRM to like half of its current size, and it would still be perfectly good for extreme overclocking as far as I'm concerned. You could, like, I'm a fan of the fact that it has 4 PCIe slots. That's a cool feature. That's a good thing. You could throw the killer LAN out and replace one with Intel, right? And honestly, if you were doing a pure extreme overclocking board, you could just go like single Intel or dual Intel gigabit, and that would be cheaper than whatever they're doing right now with it. The board does have dual BIOS. It does have like BCLK up down buttons. It has a power reset. They have the silly OC knob, which should just disappear as far as I'm concerned. There's a postcode on it. They also have a silly little OLED screen. I forgot about that, don't they? There's a silly OLED screen. Silly OLED screens are really expensive. Silly OLED screens are probably the worst gimmick motherboard vendors have come up with in the last several years as far as I'm concerned. It is a silly OLED screen, isn't it? Am I not misremembering that? Or is it? Yeah, the componentry on this board is impressive. Built to last, shield. Okay, so yeah, the stops you from ripping out the memory slots. The EMI shielding is like, I wonder how much that actually does. Like, yes, you do have a full cover. But it's just like you still have a gap in there, and the whole memory stick itself, like, as far as I know, nobody has like memory sticks where the heatsinks are actually grounded. I don't think they're grounded anyway on most memory sticks. So it's just like, yeah, but the memory stick itself doesn't actually have any shielding, so I have to wonder how effective that is. Anyway, so we've got all of that. Then this right here, I have no idea what this is. This is just, I have absolutely no idea what this is supposed to be about, because like all of these do is they ground the motherboard to the case. Like that's it. That's all those do. Like I don't see how having a different arrangement of solder blobs is gonna significantly change like anything. So yeah, anyway, so we can ignore that. Titanium choke too. Yeah, so we have some kind of more expensive premium inductor, which like this doesn't tell us anything because, well, actually funny thing about inductors is like there's a lot of really expensive like proprietary alloys for the inductor cores. But yeah, you're not going to be told what exact alloy it is, right, by the manufacturers, because it's just like, oh no, that's a secret. But they will give you endurance ratings of that kind of thing. So anyway, I don't really, can't really read too much into that. DR MOS, yeah, well, these have been around for ages. Just, driver and 2 MOSFETs. Not much to it. High C cap is a small, but wait, where? What? Like, to be fair, they're just talking about like SMD capacitors, but where are they? Oh, wait, they might be referring to the ones by the memory. Solid cap, yeah. So, MSI uses Nippon Chemicon for their capacitors, if anybody was wondering. There, that's who I was trying to think of. So yeah, Japanese solid caps built for high, yeah, whatever. It's aluminum polymers. Like, who cares? Not that not that interesting as far as I'm concerned. We've seen it before. All basically, so like most motherboards do this at the high end. From like $200 up, it's pretty standard to just see aluminum polymers everywhere, and even from made in Japan, which do cost a bit more. Funnily enough, Nichicon, who are like one of the biggest suppliers of aluminum polymer capacitors, they were recently, well, not recently, but not that long ago, they were hit with with fines for price fixing capacitors. So yeah, that's funny. Anyway, server grade PCB thing. So yeah, this is actually a thing. And as you can see, it's literally just a more uniform glass fiber weave, and that does help with signal integrity. So yeah, and it is more expensive, so that does add to sort of the quality of the board and the cost of the board. So yeah, that's fair. And yeah, though the primary purpose of this is for the PCIe 4.0. It might have benefits also for things like memory overclocking. The thing is, PCIe 4.0 is, I think it runs at like way higher frequency than your DDR4 memory interface. So it also depends on what frequency you're looking at, right? Like that's the thing, is just if you're in that frequency range, then the difference doesn't actually, like, it's not much of a difference. Whereas at very high frequencies, the more uniform fiberglass layers help a lot more. Which is why it's like the primary use of this is for the PCIe 4.0, and there's even like mid-range boards that are on like upgraded PCB materials, so that they can get the PCIe 4.0 signaling to work to the second slot from the CPU, right? Because when you have X8 you have the X16 from the CPU, and then you have the X8 slot from the CPU, and that one, I think, is the one where it's just like, oh yeah, you actually need a higher quality material. But the really low end boards where you just have a chipset slot and the first CPU slot, those I think are still on normal PCB substrates, like what you'd normally get on low end boards anyway. Anyway, so yeah, some crazy expensive build quality stuff. Or was it? So we went over the server grade PCB. The thing is just like this board, the price doesn't make sense, and it's just such a weird mishmash of features. It just kind of feels like they threw things at the motherboard and just threw everything together. Speaking of memory, let's just check the QVL for this board, right? Like that I feel is often the best way to figure out what kind of memory support you have on a motherboard, is just check out the manufacturer's QVL, Ryzen 3000. We're going to go supported speed, and we're going to look at the highest supported speeds. So we have 4800 megahertz on a Corsair kit, and another Corsair kit, the 4800, G-Skill 4800, Galax 4600. Yep. So that's for two. It's cool that they're doing like 1, 2, and 4 DIMMs, because a lot of other vendors are just doing 2 and 4, but eh. So I'm wondering what the highest speed for 4 DIMMs is. 4,000, that's on Micron E, of course it is. Wait, is that an actual 4,000 spec? Okay, that is a 4,000 spec kit, isn't it? Because yeah, RAM speed. Because the thing is I saw like an ASRock board where they were like, hey, this 3600 megahertz memory kit, we validated that it can overclock to over 4000 megahertz. And it's just like, no. Like, no. If the kit doesn't do it on XMP, that doesn't count. Okay? As far as I'm concerned. So, yeah. So, and it looks like, okay, yeah. So Micron E-Die seems to be the go-to for high density if you want high speed. Because the thing is, as far as I know, E-Die like puts less strain on the memory controller. So that's why it's supported up to 4 DIMMs, whereas like you're looking at something like this, where it's just like, oh yeah, nope, no, you can't. So that's for 32 gigs right there. And then for high density, like say 64 gigs, which, okay, here we're just seeing 3600, yeah, more E-Die. Oh, there we have some B-Dies as well. Up to 3600, that's not bad. 3733 B-Die. Right? Yeah, that's probably B-Die. We keep scrolling through. Man, this is a really nice QVL. Like, I'm a fan of it. Anyway, I want to see what 16 gigs they have validated for 4. So I think the best way to do that is just going to be scroll to the top and go from largest size. Oops. No. Up. Yeah, okay, 16. And, oh, it stayed by RAM speed, didn't it? Yeah, it did stay by RAM speed. Cool. So 16 gigs. Oh, man, they're doing 3600 on 4 16 gig sticks. That's impressive. Like, that's actually impressive. I think this might be the first board that I've seen where that's actually like on the QVL, where it's just like, yeah, you can do 3600 on 64 gigs of RAM. It's just a shame that so much else on this motherboard is just a mess, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah. 3466, and then, okay, yeah, and at this point it's just like 3466. They're doing it on like everything. So that's pretty neat. Anyway, so overall, the Godlike, I mean, it's not like, I just think it's a very weird, like, I don't know. There's definitely, it's not a bad board. It just doesn't make too much sense, in my opinion, in terms of anything. And it's not very cost effective for that reason, because there's not any I wouldn't consider it excellent in any one department, except maybe memory overclocking. There it seems to be absolutely killer. So anyway, let's move on to the Creation, which is I think like from MSI's high end, the Creation is probably the more interesting board. And anyway, so this is $499, and this, this checks off like all of my requirements. So we have our Intel LAN, 10 gig of Quantia, which I don't care about that, but I'm happy to see the Intel LAN, 10 gig of Quantia. But what's really cool about this board is the I/O. So much USB, and you still have your clear CMOS button on this, and the board does have BIOS flashback. It's just not on the rear I/O, and you get your postcode. It is EATX. Like, this board is absolutely huge, right? Like, this thing is square, basically. So do keep that in mind, that this motherboard might be a little bit awkward in some cases. But, yeah, and then they still have 2 USB 3.0 internal at right angles down here. Also, the right-angled 24-pin makes the fact that this motherboard is already really wide even more of a concern than normal. The postcode's in the wrong place. You're going to cover that up with a GPU if you install one, but not the, like, at least there is a postcode, and power and reset buttons as well. And yeah, VRM on this is downgraded from the Godlike, obviously. I think it's a 12 plus, wait, let's see. We can just check MSI's website. Do they not mention how many phases? I was expecting them to mention that. Extended heat pipe. Yeah, like, you have a heat pipe, so what? Okay, nope. I think it's either a 12 plus 2 or a 14 plus 2. Either of those is completely fine as far as I'm concerned. It's still on like a upgrade. I think this one's still on an upgraded PCB material. Now, if we go through the component section, right, then Yeah, memory shields again, which I'm not sure that this does much of anything. Especially like, well, on the X570 boards, MSI does have full ground fills going over their memory traces. So at that point, like the shields around the memory slots might extend those a bit and help. But yeah, anyway, I think they're mostly like reinforcement to not rip them out of the board, anti-sag, anti-rip out as well, because people rip out PCIe slots when they forget to undo the tab. So it's the main reason why the metal armor on PCIe slots is a thing these days. Same thing about the capacitors. Wait, nothing about the PCB substrate? Really? Interesting. As far as I know, this should still be on a like a lower on a better dielectric, but it doesn't seem to be mentioned anywhere, so that's interesting. I wish they just had like a list of things, but still, the VR, like this I think in MSI's high end is the most reasonable board. Like in terms of, especially if you're just like a daily user and you just want a crazy workstation board, then this thing makes so much sense. Also, it comes with an with the M.2 expander thing, which I think that's like an actually, like if you're gonna put an expansion card as part of your feature set, then that's the kind of expansion card I appreciate. Because it does mean you can just have more M.2 SSDs, which for a lot of, like, especially with PCIe 4.0, that's probably, like, people who care about super high-speed storage and having lots of super high-speed storage, they're kind of going to go for X570, and some, like, the expander card for them makes a ton of sense. Anyway, let's check out the memory QVL, just because I'm kind of interested if it's significantly different. Actually, I wonder if we can rank it by what's qualified for 4 DIMMs. Okay, wait, speed. And then 4 DIMMs. Because I think, yeah, it remembers the sorting. That's cool. And again, 4000. So actually, yeah, same as the Godlike there. Same as the Godlike there again. And then, yeah, it basically looks the same as the Godlike for 4 DIMM support. So I'm just going to assume that it's another daisy chain. Yeah, and then for 2 DIMM support, we just go by absolute maximum supported speed. Wait, are we not on? We're on the creation. Eh? Did they I think they forgot to. Did they copy paste? Wait, I'm gonna reload the page. Like I'm thinking maybe Firefox like cached something, and we're looking at the Godlike QVL, not the, because it like officially it only says 4600 everywhere, and then it's just like now you look at the 4800. Wait, that's Micron E-die on that kit? Holy crap. Okay. I mean, technically, yeah, E-die can do that, but I'm just... And then we also have B-die as well from G-Skill for 4800. So, actually, I think there was more 4800 megahertz kits on the Godlike than on this, but still, it's like it can do 4800 on 4800 megahertz kits. So, yeah, this has got to be I'm like 99% certain at this point that this is a daisy chain, because that's the only way that I could see those kinds of speed working on 2 DIMMs. At least as far as I know, that's like the only way you'd get that kind of speed working on 2 DIMMs. So that's impressive. And yeah, it's interesting how their, marketing is just like, does say that it's only 4600, right? Oh no, they don't mention memory support at all here. But still, I think this board in MSI's lineup is probably one of the most interesting ones, because it also, like, overall, out of all of the X570 motherboards currently available, it's one of the cheapest ways to get 10 gig LAN. Yeah, and I just love the rear I/O, right? Like, this board just kind of has, if you just want to cram stuff into your motherboard, this is going to hook you up. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that board. I think it's really, like, it has an interesting, just, it seems well balanced, better balanced than the Godlike, which is just like as far as I can tell, that's a weird mishmash of stuff. And this seems to be like, hey, we actually know what we want to do. We want to have a ton of USB. We want to have great networking support. We want to have, which I do know some people who actually don't like the Aquantia 10 gig, but I don't test networking, so I don't know. And as far from what I've heard, apparently at least being 10 gig is better than having like a weird 5 gig or a 2.5 gig, because Apparently switches, like there's not a lot of switches that like support that or something. But anyway, yeah, the Creation overall just like seems like a better balanced board than the Godlike. The Godlike, it's a mess in my opinion, and the Creation is just like, well, it has all of the things you want from a high-end board. It has a less ridiculous price tag, and its feature set makes much more sense. And you sacrifice, I guess, a little bit of memory compatibility to just, you know, save a bunch of money and actually, in some ways, have advantages over the Godlike, which is why I don't like the Godlike very much. It's like the name implies it does everything, but this technically kind of does more. Anyway, so moving on from the Creation, we have the Ace. And yeah, I think the Creation and the Ace share VRM designs, which is fine because that VRM is great. But we do like it's the easiest way to do that comparison. Okay, no, well, the Creation has different capacitors, so that screws me over, doesn't it? That's 8. That's also 8. That's 16 total. Okay, so this is a 14 plus 2. This is a 12 plus 2. But they're all actually using 60 amp power stages, which is why I didn't pay, like, basically both of these boards have ridiculously good V-Core VRMs. The main issue I have with the Ace is that this kind of, like, this is from that same series of motherboard, like, this technically falls into that same product line as the Godlike, whereas the Creation is, like, its own workstation class thing. Or content creator class thing, okay? Because real workstations would look, again, a little different, I guess, but because content creators are more gamer oriented than like real workstation hardware. But yeah, this thing runs into that weird issue of the Godlike where it's just like, well, your SATA ports disappeared. And to be fair, the reason why you don't have all the SATA ports is because if you use two M.2 devices, you actually lose two of your SATA ports. The problem I have with this is just like, what if I have 6 SATA devices and one two M.2 SSDs, right? Like then I want 6 SATA ports, and there's going to be people who want 4 SATA ports and 3 M.2 devices, and this board just like, and basically as far as I can tell, because the thing is they have space. Right, like if they move that postcode into where that stupid OC dial is, right? If they got rid of the OC dial and put the postcode there, then you would have 6 SATA ports. And that would kind of be awesome. And instead, they just kind of decided 4 SATA ports because, yeah, I don't know. So I'm not really a huge fan of that. But for most people, I don't think that's going to be a huge concern. Because, again, you do have a bunch of M.2 slots, and I guess I'm kind of old-fashioned with having so much SATA storage. Actually, all of my storage is SATA. Like, I literally don't have any M.2 anything, because I think it's overpriced, but, yeah. So, most people would prefer having more M.2, but still, there's boards in this price range, in the same price range as the Ace, which do offer 6 SATA ports. So, that kind of makes the Ace kind of awkward. The VRM for the price range, which the Ace is 370, is actually not that bad. So this is going up against like the Crosshair 8 Hero, the the Phantom Gaming X from ASRock, and the what else is it going up against? It's going up against the X570 Master from Gigabyte. So the Master has 6 SATA ports, also 3 M.2, and I think the Master's M.2 layout actually gives you 2 full-length slots and one shorter, like one shorter length. One shortened one, but I'm not sure how, again, like I don't pay that much attention to M.2, so I don't know how much people care about the length, like the length support on those. But that is one thing that I did notice is like the Master probably has, in terms of like SATA and M.2 support, that's probably your best option at around this price point. Because the Crosshair or the ASRock board, which actually I think the ASRock board also ends up in the same M.2 configuration as the MSI board here. But yeah, so that's kind of that. The rear I/O is, funnily enough, slightly better than what you get on a... Is it? Yeah, I think it's better than what you get on a Godlike because there's more USB ports in total. You do get BIOS flashback. You do get clear CMOS, Wi-Fi, 2.5 gig. I hope hopefully this is Intel, right? Like the count. Yeah. Okay. So you have one Intel, one Realtek. There. That's much more normal. Which this is standard for the $350 price point. Like can't think of a single $350-ish motherboard that doesn't have a single 1 gig Intel and a single 2.5 gig Realtek. It seems like everybody just decided, hey, this is the networking that you get at this price point. So yeah, all of the boards at this price point have basically this configuration, so that's not really a win for MSI. I really think the only thing that this motherboard could excel in is like, because in the VRM department, it is technically more efficient than what you would get on the X570 Master from Gigabyte. But at the same time, like this is a 6-phase getting doubled into a 12 plus. This is a 6 plus 2, with doubling to get the 12 phases on VCore. Which again, like that's not really like, I don't think you're going to notice a difference in that in day-to-day overclocking, if at all. But it is just kind of like, yeah, basically Gigabyte with the Master kind of spent way too much on the controller and then arguably not enough on the power stages. But still, because Gigabyte really wanted that real 12 phase. But anyway, with this board, you know, you do get a really, like, it's a really solid VRM. It is slightly weaker than what you get on like a Crosshair 8 Hero, but you know, it's the difference between 12 power stages and 14. So I consider all of the boards VRM-wise just equivalent because they're all right on top of each other in terms of spec. So not really any winners. And this board, so yeah, this board basically reasons why I would buy this board is you like MSI BIOS, or MSI just has a better BIOS this time around than everybody else, and it clocks better, does better memory clocks or something like that. Like that's the only ways I can see this motherboard winning over the other motherboards in this price range, because it doesn't really have any super exceptional features. And that kind of goes for a lot of the motherboards in this price range, where it's like, because everybody has the 2.5 gig LAN, everybody has the 1 gig Intel, everybody has a good overkill VRM of different, like different extents of overkill, right? For the VRM. Then we have everybody except Asus has 3 M.2 slots. Everybody except MSI has 6 SATA ports, right? Everybody has roughly the rear I/O. Actually, I think Gigabyte might be winning on the USB-B rear I/O front. Everybody has postcodes. Everybody has power buttons. Everybody has reset buttons. Everybody has BIOS flashback. Everybody has clear CMOS. Like everybody has everything. Is essentially what I'm trying to get at. Is just all of these motherboards are the exact same, and so the question remains is just like, well, do you have some exceptional memory overclocking support? Memory support. Wait, what's there? RX 3000. So let's see what the max speed supported is. Also 4800. Funny, they still have it as listed everywhere as just 4600. That they are listing as 4800. So that's interesting. And for 4 DIMMs, 4,000. Yeah, so the memory support, damn. Like, their memory support is very... So, I mean, this is good memory support, assuming that the QVL is actually accurate, because sometimes some of the QVLs are a bit optimistic, but at least all of these are like XMP spec, right? Like the kit has an XMP of 4,000, the motherboard does 4,000, because I have seen some boards where it's like, oh yeah, if the kit is spec'd for 3,000, but 3,600, but we support 4,600, and it's just like, well, that doesn't sound reliable at all. Anyway, so yeah, like that's kind of that's the only different, like that's the whole $350 price range, in my opinion, is just like the only real differentiation in this range is going to be who has the best BIOS and who has the best memory overclocking support, because the VRMs are functionally the same. I guess also the differentiation could be in like who has the loudest chipset cooler. That could be a thing that could differentiate these boards, but again, like that's really hard to judge. Like you'd have to actually test the boards somehow for that, but still, it's just well, impossible to judge for me, but anybody who has all of the boards at the $350 price range could just do noise measurements for them. But yeah, it's just like, because everybody has the same LAN, everybody has the Wi-Fi 6, everybody has everything in this price range. So it's just like, yeah, pick, you know, put all the brand names on a 6-sided die, right? Two brand names each for ASRock, MSI, Asus. Roll that die, whatever it lands on is a good choice. And it really really kind of, actually no, 6-sided die. No, that doesn't work out, does it? Because there's 6 sides. Asus, Gigabyte, MSI, ASRock. Like, I didn't normally include ASRock in that. See, my main concern, my assumption originally, I was like, ASRock's gonna have god awful memory support again, But I don't know. Like, I don't know. I think they might have problems with memory support, but we'll see. Like, maybe they figured it out at last. But yeah, it's just this price range is just so ridiculously competitive that it's just like I can't help you. I wish I could, but it's just one of those price ranges where you'd have to take all the boards and actually test them. And it wouldn't even be test them for like overclocking. It's just like some of it's just personal preference. Like I would personally take MSI BIOS over ASRock BIOS any day of the week, right? And arguably I'd take MSI BIOS over Asus BIOS as well, depending on exactly how much Asus decided to like, depending on what Asus decided to do with it. But if it still works the same way it's been working for most of their DDR4 platforms, I would actually go and just take an MSI board over an Asus board, assuming the overclocking performance was the same. And feature set wise, it's basically identical. The biggest complaint I have for the Ace is the 4 SATA ports. They really should have had 6. And I know they ran out of space, but they should have just thrown out the OC dial thing because it doesn't. That's a really useless feature. Anyway, moving on to the Gaming Pro Carbon. And this board, so this one drops the shielding, which is kind of interesting because I think the X470 Gaming Pro Carbon actually has the shields. Where is it? $260. So this is a price range that, in my opinion, is really bad because you can get $200 boards that do almost everything the $260 boards do. So, except maybe the memory overclocking. But, you know, I'd say if you're trying to... Like, the thing is, with Ryzen, the memory performance sweet spot seems to be just like 3600 or 3733 megahertz, and you don't see major differences between the motherboards until you're well over 4000. So at least as far as I can tell so far, it seems to be that like up until 4000, it's going to be basically the same across the board. And then past 4000, that's where you're going to start seeing major differences. So let's go through the spec sheet for this thing. X570, yeah, memory support up to 4400. So that's interesting. They're dropping memory support, lower a bit. Intel Gig LAN. What do we have? What else do we have? Yeah, it supports Crossfire. No SLI support. As far as, yeah, no SLI support. So the thing about SLI support is you actually, if you're a motherboard vendor, you actually have to pay NVIDIA to get it. Which is like one of the ways you can save money on your motherboard is to not... Oh, wait a minute. I see why they don't have SLI support. They don't have a second CPU slot. Oh, that's bad. That actually is a pretty major downside as far as I'm concerned. Because most of the other motherboard, and they all only have 4 SATA ports. No, wait, there's 2 down there. Okay, missed those. For $270, those should not be vertical. Honestly, like, yeah, those shouldn't be vertical. Oh, the VRM on this is decent. The heatsinks evidently look pretty substantial. It's a 12 phase. It's using dual NFETs. They're pretty good dual NFETs. I've not yet run through the calculations, but they don't look like they should have any issues. So I'm not concerned about the VRM in terms of like thermal performance, but so the obvious issue I see with this motherboard is because like they're doing CPU X16, chipset X4. That's why they don't have SLI support. In the $260 price range, basically all of the other motherboards will give you an X16 and an X8 off of the CPU and then an X4 off of the chipset. And that's why most of the other boards will actually do SLI. So that is like, yeah, they've really cut down on the PCIe device support, which I'm not a fan of. The rear I/O looks acceptable. Yeah, this isn't a disaster. But it's also not exactly super impressive. It doesn't look any worse than what you'd get from a lot of the other vendors either, though. So I don't really see an issue with it. But yeah, this board just like the thing is, for the same price, you could get a 12-phase VRM using 40 amp power stages from Gigabyte. You could get a 4-phase with 3 50 amp power stages per phase from Asus. You could get a 10-phase from ASRock, which uses 50 amp power stages per phase. You could get or you could get this. I don't think these technically, these dual NFETs are probably in the 40 to 50 amp range if they were equivalent, like if they had an equivalent rating system to power stages. So they're really not bad, but so VRM wise, this isn't really that different, but the fact that they literally, like, you're losing the PCIe slot support So I don't know. Like for some people, that's a really big deal. For some people, it's not a big deal. But if you don't care about the PCIe slot support, it's just like, well, you could also just get like a Gigabyte Elite board, right, for X570. That has the same PCIe slot configuration. It has a similar looking, well, yeah, I think it actually has a similar situation going on with the rear I/O section. You do lose the Wi-Fi, but yeah, if you don't care about the Wi-Fi, that's not really a win with this motherboard. And it is priced the same, like the X570 Pro Wi-Fi from Gigabyte has is basically the same feature set, except you do get the extra 16x PCIe slot. And yeah, this board kind of awkward. Kind of an awkward motherboard. I feel like they really, like, it should have had the extra PCIe slot as far as I'm concerned, which probably, like, that's very likely a pretty expensive thing to do because PCIe 4 signal integrity is a pretty hard thing to, like, that's expensive to maintain when designing the board and for production as well. But the thing is just like, I can't think of, like, there's no killer feature with this motherboard. Like the only reason why I would think of buying this motherboard is if you absolutely hate all the other brands, right? If you're like an MSI loyalist, then yes, at $250, this motherboard makes a lot of sense. But considering the rest of MSI's lineup, but considering the fact that like Gigabyte has a board that does everything this does and gives you an extra PCIe slot, I'd take that. Or that Asus has a board that does everything this does and just doesn't do the Wi-Fi and gives you an extra PCIe slot. You know, you could also take that. Or you could get a motherboard from Gigabyte that's cheaper, that loses the Wi-Fi and has the same PCIe slot configuration. Or you could get a motherboard from Asus that loses the Wi-Fi, actually keeps Wi-Fi, but it's not Wi-Fi 6. I assume this is Wi-Fi 6, right? What is the Wi-Fi here? What? Detail. Yeah, it is Wi-Fi 6. So, yeah, so if you wanted, but if you don't care about having Wi-Fi 6 support, which, like, I assume, like, you need some pretty fast internet to need that as far as I'm concerned. But if you don't need Wi-Fi 6 support, then it's just like the Tough Gaming from Asus exists, which has basically the same feature set as this, saves you $60, and you can go and spend those $60 on a better memory kit, a better CPU cooler, or a whole bunch of, like, upgrades for your system that actually give you better performance, whereas this motherboard just kind of doesn't give you better anything, as far as I can tell, right? Like, yeah, and it's basically feature parity with some Gigabyte boards, except for the PCIe slot configuration. So, man, I really wish I could be more positive about the MSI motherboard lineup, but like, I'm just not seeing, like, maybe they win in memory support. Like, that's the only place they can redeem themselves at this point with this board. It's just, like, having better... That seems to be the trend, I think, so far with the MSI boards, isn't it? It's just, like, I hope they have good memory support, because feature-wise, this motherboard doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, and, okay, so up to 4400 megahertz, so that's not spectacular. A lot of boards do that. And they do lose a little bit. Yeah, they go down to 3733 on 4 DIMMs, which is fine. Like, that's not a huge concern as far as I'm concerned. Not really a big deal. And 3600 on 64 gigs of RAM. So that's interesting that that's supported so relatively, like, across so many boards. Yeah. But, I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with the board. It's just not necessarily the most, like, if you have a very specific set of features you want, there's more cost-effective ways to get them than this motherboard right here, right? That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, it's not bad board, but you can get a similar feature set from somebody else for less. So yeah, and if you save money, you can dump that into like a better memory kit, better cooler, better graphics card, you know, and that is, I think, far more important if you're doing a gaming system, or even if you're doing competitive benchmarking, right? Because, like, here's the thing: if you buy a 3900X and your goal is to just like bench 3D Mark Firestrike, well, newsflash, having a better memory kit will help you. Like, assuming the CPU hits the same speed on like all of the boards, which it probably will. At least on, like, ambient. And it's not like this has LN2 support, so I don't know why you'd worry about that with this board. Actually, you could go and like buy a Crosshair 7 Hero if you want LN2 support, I guess. But anyway, yeah, you could buy a cheaper board and then just spend $60 more on like a really high bin B-die memory kit or something like that, right? And that for benchmarking would overall make more like that would help you more than a $260 motherboard. And then in a daily configuration, it's just like, well, there's motherboards that do the same thing for less or do roughly the same thing for less. But inherently not a bad board. It's just not necessarily the not necessarily the most competitive. Anyway, let's move on to the Gaming Edge. So the thing about the Gaming Edge and the where is it? This one. So these boards all use the same VRM, right? Now the Edge has the biggest heatsink on it. And the VRM itself is actually, so this VRM is the most borderline for running a 3950X, but it should handle a 3900X quite well. And it's borderline for a 3950X based on like how well the heatsinks work out. Because that's kind of the thing is like I actually talked to MSI about this. I was basically like, look, if you don't, like the way I see it with your VRM design is that you can go two ways, right? You can either make your VRM ridiculously efficient and then you can use fashion accessories for heatsinks, or you can make your VRM not so efficient and compensate for it with really good heatsinks. And this board is very much in that compensate for it with very good heatsinks. They've also, compared to the X470 Gaming Plus, they added doublers to the VRM, which, considering that it uses discrete MOSFETs, which are generally slower than power stages and have more power loss due to just switching on and off, doublers actually significantly help with your efficiency when you're running a bunch of discrete MOSFETs. So, yeah, I'm not sure. Like overall, this VRM can potentially do quite well thermally. Especially depending on like how the heatsinks do. So this is not like, it's not the best VRM on X570. It's actually one of the weaker ones. But if not the weakest. No, ASRock exists. I forgot. So it's like it's probably like second to the bottom of the X570 VRM configurations that you can get. But that doesn't mean it can't necessarily, like, it won't necessarily be able to handle a 12 core. It can very well probably still do that even when overclocked, or even the 16 core might be viable depending on your airflow situation. But still, so the VRM on all of these is the same, but you get different heat sinks. This one has the smallest heat sinks, and also the Dash A. Like, here's the thing about the Dash A Pro. It is $159, right? And for $169 you can get the Gaming Plus. And as far as I'm concerned, that makes the Dash A makes this board not make sense, because the Gaming Plus gives you a significantly better heatsink for your V-core. And yeah, that alone is just reason enough to go for the more expensive board as far as I'm concerned. Also, I wonder what the specification differences are. So yeah, this is Realtek LAN. This is also Realtek LAN. It looks like they literally just swapped the heatsinks. Didn't they? Yeah, it looks like they really did just swap the heatsinks. And change the accessory pack. Oh, that's actually nice. Oh, did they even change the accessory? Oh yeah, they give you a little M.2 cover. Okay, well that's not useful at all. That's not 10. That right there is definitely not what I would consider $10 worth of value. But the heatsinks are actually a pretty significant upgrade. And actually, how does the rear I/O look? I guess it's the same rear I/O, isn't it? Yeah, it is. So yeah, there's like very little. It is literally just the Gaming Plus is basically the Dash A with a Dash A Pro with a heatsink upgrade kit, which for $10 I'd take that. Like, that seems like a good deal, right? To me, $10 for a much better VRM heatsink seems like a great idea. Anyway, yeah, like, just gonna see some close-up pictures of the board, but yeah, It's literally just like that they significantly, actually they upgrade both of them. Even the SoC heatsink seems to have a bit more surface area. So yeah, like I don't know. I kind of feel, and the other thing is at the $169 price point, you can also get the X570-P from Asus, and the Dash P from Asus just kind of kills everything in this price range when it comes to VRM build quality. Not necessarily the feature set, but the feature set across all of these boards seems to be basically the same from everyone. So it's just one of those things that it's just like, well, you know, you could just get a better, you can get a better VRM and the exact same board in every other aspect from Asus, or you can get the, well, no, I don't see a justification for the Gigabyte board either. So yeah, that's kind of that. It's just at $169, like $159 for like $10, and you get a significantly better build board as far as I'm concerned. So the Dash A doesn't really make a ton of sense for that reason. Now the Gaming Edge Wi-Fi, here we have a simple question that needs to be answered. Is it Wi-Fi 6 or is it regular Wi-Fi? Like normal Wi-Fi, because if it's Wi-Fi 6, then for people who care about Wi-Fi 6 and just want Wi-Fi 6 really cheaply, this is probably the best option, ignoring the fact that you can probably just buy a Wi-Fi 6 PCIe card and stick it in a B450 motherboard. That might be more cost effective, and the Wi-Fi is not. Yeah, it's just AC. Yeah, so the conclusion here for me is that this board doesn't, yeah, okay, so this is hard. Like, this is hard, because I really, really liked MSI's, say, X470, well, some of their X470 lineup, and I really like their B450 stuff, but here it's just like, so at 100, in the low end, we have Asus with a better VRM and basically the same feature set, or Gigabyte with the better VRM with and basically the same feature set, or, well, that's it. The other option is ASRock, and they're not better VRM or better feature set. Though MSI does have BIOS flashback, even down here, which is one of the things. But the thing is, and then when you go up to the $200 price point, like the thing is, the Gaming Edge is actually $210, and for $200 you can get the Tough Gaming Wi-Fi, right? And the Tough Gaming Wi-Fi has the same exact Wi-Fi, well, not exact same chip, but same speed support on their Wi-Fi card as the Gaming Edge. It's cheaper. It has a way better VRM. It's that 4-phase with three 50 amp power stages in parallel, and you know the networking is like, yeah, it's also a Realtek LAN controller, or you can go with a Gigabyte X570 Elite at $200 and you get Intel LAN. And it's just like, well, yeah, like this board doesn't make a ton of sense. It's like again, like the only thing I think MSI could win on is just like BIOS and memory support. Which I do think, like, technically the 4400 megahertz spec on this board is better than what you get from, like, the Gigabyte Elite board and that kind of thing. But at the same time, I feel like if you're buying a $200 X570 motherboard, will you really be buying a 4000 plus megahertz memory kit? Or do you even care about having 4000 plus megahertz memory support? Considering that like, it seems to be that with Ryzen, you get the best performance at, like, 3733 with the tightest timings you can run, right? And again, that's just not something where the motherboard matters that much. So that is kind of like, yeah, sucks to be MSI, I guess, because like, I like MSI's, I guess, well, it's not really like, I like their high end, right? I think the Creation is an amazing board. The Creation is just a really cool board. And at $500, if you want like a high-end X570, that seems to be like, to me, that seems to be maybe the go-to for a high-end X570 board. And then the Ace depends on, you know, how it compares against the other $350 boards. Potentially, like, the thing is, at $350, as I said, is like super competitive. Everybody makes great motherboards at that price point, and it's just like, well, choose your own poison. But at the lower price points, it's just like these are just not that competitive, because like, here's the thing is, like, I'm not complaining about MSI having a worse VRM. I'm complaining that their VRM is worse and they don't have anything else that to sell you on the motherboard, right? Because Gigabyte also has BIOS flashback all the way down to their cheapest board, right? So it's like, that's that's, I guess, the other thing that MSI has is like, yeah, they have BIOS flashback even on their Dash A, but Gigabyte has BIOS flashback all the way down to the Gaming X as well. And Gigabyte at this price point has a better VRM. And it's just like, so yeah, that makes it really, like, if you just objectively made a list of all of the pros and cons physically of what's on the motherboards, in the low end, you kind of have Gigabyte and Asus just just winning everything as far as I'm concerned. And then in the mid-range, you start seeing like, okay, so MSI's really, like, MSI gets competitive, Gigabyte is competitive, ASRock is competitive. ASRock at $300 is actually a crazy, like, with the Taichi at $300, that's a really, really good deal as far as I'm concerned. And then who else is there? So ASRock at $350, Asus, Gigabyte, yeah, MSI, like, they're all really competitive at $350. And then MSI's real winner in their entire lineup is the Creation, because it's not $700, but it does have 10 gig LAN. And everybody else, if you want 10 gig LAN, you're paying $700. And Asus doesn't even offer 10 gig LAN at all. And if you want, and I feel like the actual fact that they include that M.2 expansion card, that's actually really cool. Like, that's a huge value add in my opinion for this price point, because a lot of the other, like, first of all, there's no other $500 motherboard, as far as I know. And so, yeah, I think that's really cool. And then they have just a ton of USB. And, like, they have, like, this is a really, like, this board, as I said, this board just makes sense. It has a really good mix of features. And then you look at the rest of MSI's, and then you look at the Ace, and the Ace still makes sense. And then you look at everything below the Ace, and it's just like, well, this don't make any sense at all. Because they cost more, and they aren't better in any... Well, they cost as much as like other boards, but they don't have any real advantages over the other boards, right? Except like MSI could win on BIOS, right? Like, that's one thing where it's just like the BIOS could ultimately be some crazy, like, I don't know, maybe Gigabyte just... Gigabyte goes back to the days of like Z87 where for some reason they defaulted the voltage like 200 millivolts too high or something. Which they've had, like, I don't know how they keep doing that though. That's one thing, just Gigabyte and their voltage, like their auto voltage configuration is so bad so often. And it's like, does nobody test this? Why don't you guys just like put like, I don't know why they don't put just a limiter on their voltage where it's like, if the voltage goes past X, they're so, like, I don't know. Like, they have, like, Gigabyte has some weird stuff going on with their voltage control. Well, a lot of the time. Like, on Z87, I remember like, the boards would run auto voltage way too high. On Z70, I think Z77 as well. AM3 Plus, maybe? I think AM3 Plus, they were fine, but those boards were bad for other reasons. And then, like, their low-end X470 and B450 boards and B350 boards and X370 boards, everything with the intercell voltage controller is just a mess. And yeah, so, but the thing is, for their entire X570 lineup, there's no, like, they do have intercell controllers, but they don't have that intercell controller, because there's a few restrictions on that one because it's so damn cheap. That's what I heard was apparently causing all the issues. But yeah, so I guess MSI could win on like something like BIOS, but there's still, like, Asus is still really competitive even at like $260 against something like the Gaming Pro Carbon, or at $200 against the Gaming Edge, or at $169 against the Gaming Plus and the A Pro and the Dash A Pro. And at that point, it's just like, well, yeah, that's kind of that. Is just that's kind of my current judgment. And I really don't feel like testing this many motherboards. I'm just starting to realize it's like, oh yeah, you'd have to do like memory stability validations on all of these boards. And the other thing about BIOS is, right, like, the thing about BIOS support is, like, BIOS, you can update a bad BIOS. Right, like, you can, in my opinion, fixing BIOS issues should be, like, you can fix that after launch. Okay, like, that's not necessarily a good approach to have to that, but you can fix it. Whereas if you launch a motherboard that's just not competitive due to the feature set it has, you basically have one option, and that one option is lower the prices. That's it. Like, you can't really do anything because you're not going to release a new... You're not, like, retroactively going to, you know, ship out, I don't know, like... Because the thing is, like, these boards don't even have enough PCIe slots. You can't send, like, a, hey, here's a extra expansion card so you can have more M.2 or something. Like, no, you can't do that. So yeah, if your motherboard just ships with not a good, with a weird feature set that doesn't make any sense or is too expensive for what it offers, then it's just like, well, you can lower the price and that's about it. But if you botch the BIOS, as long as you fix it and then don't botch it again, right? That's the other concern, is that yes, you can also launch with a good BIOS and over time make it worse. You would assume that would be difficult to do, but never underestimate how bad things can get. How much worse, like, you think the BIOS was bad, it can get worse, always. Yeah, the memory support on this looks decent, but that's kind of just like, you know, just looking at the QVL. Like, QVLs can sometimes, like, even from, I trust MSI's QVL a bit more than some of the other vendors. But even that, like, I might just be biased, right? So I think MSI and Asus QVLs are probably the most reliable. And then Gigabyte and ASRock are, well, Gigabyte less, I'd say ASRock is the least, in my experience. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's it for this video, and it is just over an hour. So thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Wait, no, I should do like a summary. So, yeah. Wait, where are we? What the hell? Why is there Z390 boards? What's going on? Back to AMD land. There we go. So yeah, really awesome board. Definitely, like, if you want to spend, like, if you're willing to spend a stupid amount of money on a motherboard, this is the best motherboard. Well, one of the best options for spending a stupid amount of money on. This is definitely not this is not bad, and the rest is just kind of uncompetitive. The Godlike is a mess. Like, this should be the MEG X570. We ran out of ideas, because that's what it feels like looking at that board. Like, why is there this mishmash of features? Anyway, yeah, that's it for the video. So like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. If you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I do have, well, support directly. Because obviously sharing the videos helps out the channel, because then there's more people who get to hear about the glory of things like supporting me through Patreon and, you know, getting access to videos ahead of time, as well as some bonus videos. And of course, there's the AHOC merch from Teespring, like the shirts, the posters, the stickers, and all of that stuff, if you'd like to buy that kind of thing. So, yeah. That's it for the video. There's links to all of the things like that for supporting the channel down below. And thanks for watching. Goodbye.